Hey, welcome back to Linode. My name's Austin Gill, and in this video series, we are building full stack applications with Remix, Prisma, and SQL databases. If you have not been following along, definitely check out the links in the show description to catch the first videos so you can catch up, and also check the repo. Now, today we're actually going to be focusing on doing the read and update procedures in the database. But in order to do that, we also have to cover dynamic route matching, accessing parameters in Remix, and how we tie that all together with Prisma. So I hope you're ready and excited. Let's get into it. If we go back to the home page, we can see that we've got Nugget there, and we can see that Nugget is a dog, and we can see Nugget's name, but remember that we did have Nugget's birthday available, and we want to be able to see that. So for that, I think it would make sense to be able to click on Nugget's card and be able to see a page dedicated to Nugget. So let's go ahead and build that next. Once again, in the routes folder, because we said we're going to need a new page, I'm going to create a page. Now, I want this to live at a route called /pet/ and then something to identify Nugget. So in our case, we know that every entry in the database is going to have a unique ID. So I'm going to use that pet ID. So we're going to create a route at /pet. And then how do we actually grab the ID here? Because I don't necessarily want to create a new file for every single unique pet that's going to be in the database. That's kind of impossible considering I don't know what those IDs are going to be. So Remix gives us dynamic route matchers where we can grab the parameter of the route. So we can call it, in this case, something like petid.jsx. That didn't work. So let's try that one more time. We're going to do /pet/petid.jsx, and I forgot that $sign at the beginning. Oh, can't start with a slash. It was telling me right there. There you go. So we have this folder called pet, and inside of which we have a route at /petid, or this dynamic route matcher. So let's make sure that this is hooked up correctly. We're going to export our route handler or a route template. So now we should be able to go to our page and go to /pet/ID. And we've got it. And this ID can be anything. We've got ID there. We've got 123. We've got Nugget. Cool. And it's always going to load that same component, and it can take dynamic values here. So now we want to make sure that we are getting that dynamic value. So how do we get that in the URL? If we go back to the home page and we go to, let's see, the home page, and we've got this card. Why don't we drop the pet details into that card, right? So we can say, open up a pre-tag, and we'll do JSON.stringify the pet details and close that up. And if we see that now, we can see that the pet has some data on it. We've got the ID, name, type, birthday, created at, and updated as we would expect. So we have an ID there. That's going to be a unique identifier. The name we could use, but it's possible that we have two Nuggets in our system, right? So the ID is going to make a lot more sense. So let's go ahead and undo that. And fortunately for us, we have this component that already can handle the routing for us. And we're just going to pass it a route. We want to pass the route that we want to go to, which is pet/ and then the pet.id. So with that built, we have a new component, and it's got this link that we can click on. You can check it out. Cool. It's got a H3. It's got that link, goes to the route that we want. Excellent. If we click on it, we end up on Nugget's page. And this is Nugget's unique ID, so there won't be any other pets with this ID, which means if we can grab this information and pass it to the database, we can get the details of Nugget on this page. So let's look at doing that. Back in the pet ID page, we know that we are working with dynamic data now. So anytime that we're working with dynamic data, we can follow the same pattern that we did before on the home page, where we export a named function called loader. And we know that we're going to grab stuff from the database, so I'm going to mark that as async. Oh, no, wrong place. Async function, loader. And I know that I'm going to need the database, so let's import that db from /services/index.js. Now, I need to write a query, and for SQL, let's return some data, right? Cool. And let me just maybe start with the loader for now. So the data is going to be an object with ID of something like 123, and name is going to be like Nugget, right? Cool. Now in our component, we know that we want to grab the loader data, so we'll take import use loader data. We're going to say const pet is equal to use loader data. Now I want this to actually be typed, so I'm going to use some TypeScript magic, or some JS docs magic actually, to say that at type is going to be, and this little bit of magic here is going to say the awaited return type with the type of this loader function. Close that off, close that off. Oh, got it wrong. Type of, there we go. So now we have the type definition very conveniently. So we can do something like say that the title is going to be the pet dot, oh, I guess I got jumped ahead. We're going to say that we're returning data and calling that pet. And this data is going to be pet dot the name. Cool. Let's see what our page looks like. We've got Nugget. Of course, that is currently being hard-coded here. So now what we need to do is write a query against the database that grabs the ID. So we want that to look something like this. It's going to look very much like the home page. It's going to be select everything from the table name, so in our case, pet. And now we're going to use a where clause to provide a condition that has to be met for the row in the database. So we're going to say where the pet ID equals, and in our case, we can say like 123, or we know that this is Nugget's ID. So we can say where the ID equals this, right? So something like that. This is what the data is ultimately going to look like, and we're going to select everything. So now let's see how we write that in SQL, or convert that SQL to Prisma. So we have that async function. So I'm going to say const pet is going to equal await database dot. We want to get the pet table, and this time I want to find the first item, or the first entry. And now I need to pass a condition to match that sort of SQL condition. So I can see that there's a number of options I can pass into this object. One of them is where, so that matches there. And then that where clause, I can define a number of things. And we can see some things that are specific to SQL and some things that are unique to our model. So I want where the ID matches this. So I actually have that conveniently from the model, the ID matches, and let's go ahead and just hard code that ID in for now. So now that I've got my pet, I can say that my data coming back is my pet there. And let's see if it works. I can reload, I can reload, I can reload, and we are getting Nugget's data back. And we can see, we can prove that it's Nugget's data. I mean, in case, not saying anyone doubts me or anything, but let's go ahead and see what that data looks like. I'm gonna do JSON dot stringify the pet details null2, close that up. Awesome. So we have all the data coming in from the database. We've got the ID, the name, the type, birthday, created at, and updated at. Now, we're almost there. Of course, we probably don't want to hard code this ID in every time. So let's change that. Now we're going to need to get this ID from the URL. And fortunately, in our loader, Remix gives us that data if we need it. So we have this argument. We are going to destructure from the object that is given to us, and we're going to grab the params. And we're going to see what that params object is. Console log params. And if we go back, we see that it reloads. And if we go to the browser, we can see the params object here is going to contain that pet ID. Now, where's that pet ID coming from? It's coming from the name of the file. So if we have a dynamic parameter matcher or route matcher that starts with $, and whatever we name it is going to be the name of the parameter in this params object. So we can take that params and we can say where, let's see, I'm going to say const ID equals params.pet ID. And we can grab that value, pass it in here. Now we're dealing with dynamic data, and we should have Nugget's page. Cool, we are reading from the database to get Nugget's details based on that route. It's working really nicely. And if we look at the results of this query, we can see something that looks like this. We're going to do this comparison again and say this is what we wanted, this is what we got. We got select, and once again this stuff is all redundant. So we're going to grab every single column, and because we're grabbing every column, we can actually replace that with star or the other way around, and we're grabbing it from the public.pet. Don't actually need that. So we can say from pet where the pet ID, or this is not necessary if we're just dealing with one table, where the ID equals, and then it's got a parameterized value. So this is one of those ways that it's writing SQL that is going to avoid SQL injection nicely for us. It's going to provide a limit. The limit is how many it's going to pull, which is probably the first one. And then the offset, we actually don't have to worry about today. So we pretty much get the same SQL string that we wanted to write here. Excellent. Now that is one way to make reads from the database using either SQL or Prisma. Of course, with Prisma, it's a little bit easier because we're working within JavaScript and it's got all that TypeScript helpers and IntelliSense for us. It can tell us if we're doing something wrong. And that's more or less going to handle the reads for us. So now we've covered creates and reads. You may be wondering why I left the page looking kind of funky, like this is not something that looks really great, but that's because I think we're going to move on to the updates, and I'm going to create a UI on this page that is going to allow us to look at the data and potentially make changes at the same time. In particular, we probably want to give Nugget access to update his birthday. Okay, so to handle both showing the data and handling updates at the same time, we're going to also need another form on this page, and I'm going to combine showing the data with the inputs on the page. So let's go into this component here and let's create the form. Now, first off, I want to make a div to carry everything. It's just a little bit hard to see on this background if we have text there. So I'm going to create a form and just give it or a div to give it some container to work with. Now we know that we're going to have another form. I am quite partial to Remix's forms because those are quite handy. So we're going to pull that in from the form element, and we're going to use that again. I'm going to say form. Form, thank you. Now this form, once again, because it's going to be doing a sort of mutation, we expect it to use to be updating the data on this page. We're going to give it a method equal to post, And I should point out that uppercase or lowercase doesn't really matter a whole lot here. And in addition to that, inside of this form, I need my actual inputs. So let's import those components that we had before. I'm going to do the input and the button. And those are going to come from // components / index.js. So this form is going to look very much like the same data on the create page because it's going to contain that same data. It's going to be slightly different markup, however. So we'll have the input and do that. This first one is going to have a name equal to name. I'll probably pull this off of the home or create page, in fact. Let's go ahead and do that. Grab all this off there. Oh, accidentally forgot to put that one back. Close that. Put that in there. Awesome. This needs to be required. And then because we're actually showing data that is already defined, we're going to use a little bit of React-y stuff to say that this is going to have a default value equal to the pet.name. We're going to do the same with the select, set the default value to the pet.type. And the date is going to be slightly more complicated because the date type we're going to get from the database is going to be slightly different than the date input that we have to put here. So we're going to say the default value here is going to equal a new date object set to the pet.birthday, and we're going to convert that to an ISO string, and then we're going to split that to take out the seconds. We're going to split on this capital T, and we're just going to get the first part of that. It'll make sense in a moment. Oh, type options is not defined. Of course it's not. So we are going to need, this type options data here. So we are bringing that in. We basically copied that data over from create. So I'm going to make my life easy here, and I'm actually going to export the const type options. That way, in pet ID, I can import some of that data. So I'm going to import it, I don't know, here, I guess. Import something from create.jsx, and that's going to be the type options. Cool. Now that's defined. I can define it in one place, and if I update it, it'll be updated everywhere. And cool, we can see that Nugget is a dog, and even though that empty value is available, we have the dog set. We also have the date set. We have his birthday set. So that's actually a little bug on my part. This should be pet.birthday. Do that. If not, then an empty string. There you go. And that way we get the month, day, year. So we're also missing a submit button. So button type equals submit, submit. And we'll just say save pet. Cool. Now this form still looks a little bit funky because we don't have much spacing. So class name is going to be a grid with a gap of 4. And once again, because we're going to have that grid, we need to wrap this with a div. And we don't need a cancel button here because we are just going to be hitting save if we need to. Okay, so just really quick note, I noticed that my card here didn't have the border a moment ago, so I'm just gonna edit this in and say that sometimes Tailwind doesn't quite catch that you've made changes and the watcher sort of freezes or fails or whatever. And all I had to do was stop the dev server and restart it, and that kicked in the Tailwind watcher one more time and included my little border that wasn't there before. So just a quick note there. So next thing, like we did with our previous form, we want to be able to save this pet and send the data to an endpoint. Now, Remix, once again, treats each of its routes as its own API as long as we have an action. So we have the loader in this case, and we also are going to want an action. I'm going to copy that, paste that, rename this to action, and then I don't know if I'm going to need any of this stuff yet. So we'll just kind of comment this out, I suppose. Oh, and I totally spelled that wrong. Action. Oh gosh, bad spelling day for me. Action. Cool. Now, once again, we know that, or I know that we kind of have to return something, otherwise Remix gets mad at us. And we know that we're going to need to grab information from the request because we want to handle the request data, right? So if we remember doing this, we can say const form data is going to equal the request dot form data, and that returns a promise, so we want to await that. And then very similar to the create function again, we want to say that the body is going to equal the object dot from entries on the form data dot entries. There's a number of ways to do this. I do this because it's a little bit easier. It's just a one-liner. You could map over each of the form entries properties as well. So once again, because we're taking data from the user, which is myself, I want to make sure that I'm validating this data. Now, I could create that schema one more time from the pet, but we have it already. Oops. We have it already in the create function, so I'm already exporting it. So I'm actually just going to pull that right back in here. So I'm going to import the type options and the pet schema. And we're going to follow the same pattern to say const destructure the error, the success, and the data out of the pet schema dot safe parse on that body. And let's see what we've got so far. Console log body. So if we come here and we just hit save, we go to the terminal, we see that we've got an object with name of Nugget, type of dog, and the birthday. If I try to replace Nugget with something like Nugget 2 and we say pet, we see that we've got that data being sent as well. Pretty cool. So a lot of this is actually going to basically mimic what we have here. I'm going to copy this code as well and say if we don't have a success, we're going to throw an error and say status 400 because that's saying that we're trying to do some sort of invalid data entry. And now we need to update the data in the database. The SQL update command is going to look pretty similar to the insert command that we use to create an entry. But in this case, we want to use update, and we're going to say the table name. So in our case, pet, not pat, update pet. And we're going to set column 1 to value 1, value 1, comma, column 2, to value 2 dot dot dot, etc., etc., etc. And then we also want to pass some condition. If we don't pass a condition, it's going to update every single row in the database, and we want to limit that only to specific rows. So once again, we'll pass a where clause where we set the ID equal to some ID. Now in our case, we know how to get the ID, so we can pull that out here. We know that we're going to reuse that. And then we can pull this on down, replace that statement. Well, we need to write the Prisma schema to do that, Prisma data. So let me replace back here. It's going to look very similar. But we're going to say the pet is going to equal await database.pet, and then we're going to do an update command, update, and update is going to take another object, and it's going to expect a couple of things. One, it's going to take the data that we want to update, and two, it's going to take a where clause where we specify which item we want to update. So I'm going to use the where clause first, and I'm going to specify that we want to set the ID equal to the ID that we already have defined. And the data that we want to update is going to match the data that we have received. So data should contain either, or definitely the name, definitely the type, and possibly the birthday. And once we have the pet, we can go ahead and return that data and get rid of that null. And let's see what we've got. When I come to the front end and I hit Nugget and I don't hit Nugget obviously, but I hit Nugget's page and I change Nugget's name to Nugget 2 and I hit save pet, we get the page to reload, and then something really cool happens. Did you notice how the template or the page actually added Nugget's name, his new name, to the page without us having to like reload the page? The page doesn't refresh, right? I can go back to just Nugget, hit save, no page refresh. It just automatically changes for us. And that's something that Remix does for us without having to lift a finger. It's really awesome. It's a really nice user experience, both for the user and for the developer, because I, as a developer, just get that for free, and the user gets a nice update right after they hit save. So now I'm also going to give Nugget a birthday. Let's see, I think it's somewhere in November, so it's going to be 11. That's not 11. Oh, number lock got me. 11, and then I think we'll just say 15, and I know he's 6 years old, so 2016. I can do math. So we'll save the pet. That lets me update Nugget's birthday. We don't see any change because of course that's the new data, but if I reload the page, we can see that Nugget's birthday is reflected there. You can see still a type of dog. I can change him to a cat if I want to. We can go back to the home page, see that Nugget is a cat. Oh no, that's a mistake. Nugget is supposed to be a dog. Let's save that. So that's a really handy way to do updates. All right, how are we feeling today? We just nailed the read and the update operations of our CRUD app. So we have being able to list all of the items, being able to create individual items, being able to change them and read individual items. We also covered a lot of the routing things as it pertains to Remix and tying that all together with Prisma. So if you haven't yet, give yourself a nice little pat on the back or a round of applause. In the next video, we're going to be rounding up the operations and get onto the delete operation. So then we'll be all finished with the CRUD stuff. So I hope you're enjoying this and looking forward to it. I will catch you in the next video.